However, the cons, now let's look at those. Logistically, you've got a lot of resupply locations open. So logistically for resupply, it's really a great time to be out there. You can, all the resorts are open, all the post offices are open, all the ranger stations are open, all the, you can have a box anywhere. You can go to a general store anywhere that you can get to. However, that may last only so long. After Labor Day, things start closing up in the backcountry. Your trailheads, your little fishing resorts, your stuff like that, they start closing up. So that's a con. You're going to have fewer and fewer supply locations as you progress. You start out with a lot of them, but after Labor Day, not so much. You do, to go southbound, you do have to start later. So it's both a pro and a con. It's nice that you can start after school gets out, but you're forced to start later, and you have that bookend of the snow and the Sierra. So it's a con as well. Another one that I stress a lot, there's really two I stress a lot, and this is the first one. You're out of shape when you start. You just left home, you just left school, you just quit your job, whatever. Yeah, you've been training, but there's really no real training for through hiking except through hiking. It has to do with the muscle groups and the effect on your body. You may not have as much joint trauma, but you're going to have a lot of tendon and muscle body trauma because you're out of shape and you're on steep terrain on a foreign substance that you want to slip and fall on. It's not as nice as starting in Southern California on flat terrain, dry trail. Yeah, you got some issues with heat if you start late and issues of water, but as far as getting into shape gradually over the first week or two, you don't have a choice in the North Cascades. You're on steep snow, at least in part, and you're pushing for miles if you start later. So it's really a bad combination for physical fitness. So do everything you guys can to prepare your legs and arms for dealing with steep and slippery snow. Now, how do you deal with that except for on snow? You can't. So what I try and tell people to do is run up and down stairs, like spiral staircases. Find the closest high rise and get somebody's permission or not, however you want to do it. But I find that traumatically, it's the right kind of stuff, both going up and going down and going in different directions, spiraling one way down and climbing up, going the opposite direction to help your ankles and knees get collateral strength developed through cartilage and ligaments to prepare your legs for the goofy off-canted positions that your feet and ankles are going to get into on steep snow if you don't have a boot track present. So yeah, it's nice to start a little later on snow because there's a boot track. But if you're a forerunner, you're kind of like, better be in shape and better be prepared for it. So steep snow at the start is a negative because of the dangers being slip and fall and collide into trees, which are usually fairly close. Your tumbles, your falls on snow, especially on steep snow, are not going to be nice. We in ski patrol, we call them yard sales, where it's a flat out tumble. It accelerates very quickly and your stuff goes everywhere. So that hence the yard sale, kind of your stuff is strewn out all over the place. But if the trees stop you, because that's the problem with the Pacific Northwest, trees are at least a car's length away. I guess I got to tell the story. A student of mine was walking behind me, mid-June start from Hart's Pass. We were going to the border. If I remember correctly, it was even our first day. And there was not a boot track present. The snow was somewhat soft. I don't remember how bad the winter was preceding, but we were on full on snow. So it could have been a heavy winter, but the snow was already getting soft. So we were post holing a lot. He figured behind me, he was a guy a little bit heavier than me. He figured, well, if I step where Ned steps, I'll be on a flat surface and I'll step in his post hole. So I'm probably not going to slide. I'm not going to fall. I'm not going to lose my footing. And so that was his premise of thought. Unfortunately, because he was heavier, he post-holed in my post hole. And then what that did was, because we were on a steep side hill, As soon as you slip, your head starts moving downhill. And once that happens, either you've got to stab out with your pole on your downhill pole and push your head into the hill, or step sideways really quickly and hope that that foot doesn't slip to catch your balance so you don't fall. Well, you never know, and it's always a surprise. So it always catches you off guard and you do fall. And then you tumble. It's not like a nice, pretty slide where when you learned how to self-arrest, you started out sliding on your butt with your feet downhill. No, it doesn't go that way. You've got momentum. You hit the deck and you tumble. So within the length of a car, he hit two trees. One was fairly large. I think it was 16, 18 inches in diameter. Not that big, really, but it hit him in the head and it ripped off of his scalp. And then he hit another one and broke 3 ribs. Now, he didn't lose consciousness and he was bleeding pretty good. So we doctored him up. I was a paramedic for years in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I knew what to do in a wilderness EMT, and I was an EMT instructor for years too. So this wasn't a big deal, but I knew what was going to have to happen, and he was going to have to be flown out. So then we pressure bandaged and took care of the bleeding and all that kind of stuff, made sure that his head was okay on the inside, and then moved to a clearing so we could find a landing zone and get him flown out. But anyway, so that's all to say that you may have all the best ingredients for strategy in dealing with steep snow. Okay, I'm going to step where he stepped and all that, but you've got to be prepared for if the snow is soft for sudden post-holing. That's why sometimes going earlier where the snow is hard and frozen, therefore predictable, is really an advantage. Anyway, okay, so we're still back on cons. Steep snow at the start is dangerous. Okay, here's the second thing that I like to push. The first thing was you're out of shape at the start, so that's no bueno. The second thing that's not good is you got to go fast. You got to push yourself. As we said, depends when you start. But so that's the constant urgency makes you want to like, okay, as soon as I hit dry trail, now I can turn on the afterburners and really start catching up. Because remember, over snow, it's 1 mile an hour for safety. You really got to be careful where the rubber meets the road so you don't create a slippery condition by pushing off your toes. You're not pushing off your toes on snow unless you've got crampons that get a bite. Because it's like, and I have to say it this way, it's like trying to walk in an ice arena. If you push off your toes, zip, you're down. If you do anything sudden, like driving on ice, where you don't want to do anything quickly, no sudden movements, no sudden braking, no sudden accelerating, you don't do anything quick on ice. So you're almost like walking flat-footed all the time. Therefore, your speed is dialed way back to about 1 mile an hour. You'll learn when you can push it and when you can't, when you slip and when you have a good bite, good grip. Last thing thru-hikers want to do is to stop, take out the crampons, take off the ice axe, all that kind of, they simply don't want to do it. They'll do everything but. And it isn't until the last minute when they're literally clinging with their trail runners on, because trail runners can't bite into hard snow. They can do just fine on soft snow. But they're literally clinging and fearing for their life that they're about ready to fall because the edges of their shoes can't bite into the angled snow. If the snow is flat, different story. All right, so we're still on cons. It is less social. So you're going to have fewer people out there. You may have some people you're hiking with, but maybe for some reason, people drop out. And so now you're all by yourself. Hopefully you have already done enough hikes before this big one. You've been out for at least 3 weeks to know how you deal with loneliness, because that is a big factor. Remember, there still is a 70% roughly fallout rate, not failure, but just fallout. People fall out. Trauma is one of the big ones, injury. But in there are the emotional issues. Southbound, unfortunately, has a few more emotional issues due to loneliness because you're out there in such off season. You're going through holidays too. So sometimes that has an effect. So that's kind of a con. Wildfires are a big deal. You're starting late. If there's a drought winter, even if you start mid-June, so mid-June to mid-July, you're in Washington, mid-July to mid-August, you're in Oregon. Good Lord, August to September, you're in Northern California, which has been hit hard by huge fires over the last few years because of, if we have a drought winter, this will be our third continuous drought season. So if you're in Northern California at that time of year, it might be a real problem. So that's a con. You have potentially less water because you're leaving Oregon with snow and you're going into Northern California, which is always hot. God, Northern California is hot in mid-June. So you're there in what, mid-September or something like that. You're not going to have that much water. So that could be a problem. And I already talked about end of the year issues because you're running during you do your run out your last month during the holidays, and that's kind of rough. So we already talked about, so overview, really the whole thing about Southbound, it's really nice because you can start late, but you're starting in snow, you're starting out of shape. You have to clear the Sierra by a certain time. And so that's kind of stressful. We already talked about your schedule, light winter, heavy winter, etc. The later you start, the faster you need to go. We did that. And the last point I'm making is the earlier you start, it's more risky because you're on steep snow, which might be hard. I'm hearing funny noises out of my deck. But if you have the snow savvy, it's actually a really great time. Just like for the Sierras northbound, you want to go through the Sierra after the big snows stop, but before the thaw starts. Same in the Pacific Northwest. The snow is more predictable if it's one big hard mass. You want to be out there when it's still freezing overnight. So that'll help. So I've thrown out a lot of stuff. We're doing great for time. I like to throw things open to questions because I love to interact with you guys. I love to hear your questions and I love to give you answers based on experience. I've been out there teaching for 40 years. I often teach from January to July on snow. So that's every year. So that's a lot of experience. I did run a whole lot of classes up in Washington off of Stevens Pass. Stayed with now, unfortunately and very sadly, Jerry Dinsmore, a hiker heaven, up in Skykomish, has passed away. He and his wife ran a wonderful trail angeling. They opened their home to all the hikers for years and years, and I would stay with them. And I would also teach east of Bend up in the Sisters. So I've got a pretty good handle on, over the years, different snow conditions, different winters in both Oregon and Washington. So